What type of knowledge ultimately means self-knowledge? As an actor, as a martial artist, as a human being, all these I have learned from martial art.
His passion and talent helped make him one of the greatest action film stars the world has ever known. He was also one of the first actors to successfully bridge the culture gap between East and West. But for Bruce Lee, his personal life proved more dramatic and more intense than any movie plot. And though his style has often been imitated, the indelible mark he left behind nearly 3 decades ago has never been duplicated. On November 27, 1940, at both the hour and the year of the dragon, the child who would come to be known as Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco, California.
The dragon of the Chinese zodiac is a mythical creature. It has a fierce temper, it has tremendous power, it is quick, it is elusive, it is everything that is exotic, and that's fit Bruce Lee to a T.
His father, Li Hoi Chuan, was a well-known film and stage actor who had toured with the Cantonese Opera Company. His mother, Grace, was a traditional Chinese woman whose superstitious nature caused her to fear for the safety of her infant son.
Because his mother had lost a male child previously, it was believed that that was an omen. For that reason, she called him Sai Fong, which is like Little Phoenix, which is a feminine name, in the hopes that the spirits would think it was a female child and therefore bypass him and let him live.
But it was the name given to him by a hospital nurse that stuck, Bruce. In 1941, as the war in Europe threatened to engulf the South Pacific, Lee moved Bruce and his family back to Hong Kong. As Hong Kong felt the hardships of World War II and the Japanese invasion, Lee continued to find work as an actor. Enjoying a thriving movie career, Bruce's father often brought his son to film sets with him, and by the age of 6, the fledgling performer was cast in his first speaking role, seen here in this dubbed excerpt from Kid Chung.
Here you are, sir.
You like that, Shanna?
I should wish I could throw an act like that.
I guess that's when it's all started. The director, my father, even my father being an actor, I mean, they all said that he was a natural.
Wait, you can't walk now. There's police all around.
Even in these early films, the boy was showing the kind of charm, charisma, and body language that would mark his later screen appearances.
If you look at some of his childhood roles, there's the thumbing of the nose, and there's that sort of grimace that he did when he got mad, and all of these carried over into adult roles. But that was really Bruce. I mean, later he would say that was honest self-expression.
Despite being nearsighted and somewhat frail as a child, the young actor was growing up to be a handsome, confident, and even cocky teenager. In addition to acting, Bruce also developed a love for dancing, winning first place in a number of cha-cha contests in Hong Kong. But for a handsome young actor and dancer, post-war Hong Kong was a tough place to grow up. Gangs ruled the city streets, and Lee was often forced to fight them. But Bruce liked a challenge, and faced his adversaries head-on.
I remember when Bruce was about 14 years old, he always did like to fight, so there was a group of students, classmates, that didn't quite like him. So one day when he walked out of school, they just jumped him and beat the heck out of him, you know. I guess he felt that he had to defend himself.
In one such fight, Bruce took on the son of a feared Triad gang member. Afraid of retaliation, his parents enrolled their son in his first martial arts class. Now training under Yip Man, a martial arts master and philosopher, Bruce was instructed in the ways of discipline and self-control.
Beginning in his early teens, he became involved with Wing Chun Kung Fu, which was a form of martial arts, and this was a philosophy that was very much about finding your power and delivering it in a very efficient way.
To his parents' dismay, Bruce's street fighting continued, and the violent nature of his confrontations was escalating.
In one of his last encounters, while he was removing his jacket, The fellow he was squaring off against sucker punched him, blackened his eye, and Bruce flew into a rage and went after him and knocked the fellow out and broke his tooth, broke his arm, and the police were involved.
Police detective came up and he said, "Excuse me, Mr. Lee," he said, "your son's been really fighting bad in school." And he said, "If he gets into one more fight, I'm going to have to put him in jail."
To rescue their son from Hong Kong's mean streets, Lee's parents made the difficult decision to send their 18-year-old son to live with friends in the United States.
We saw him off, and my father was a very old-fashioned man, okay? He never hugs anybody, nobody, you know. My father actually went over and hugged him, and that really took us all by surprise, you know.
Now back at the place of his birth, Bruce settled in Seattle and soon found work at a restaurant owned by a family friend named Ruby Chow. But the rebellious young teenager was certain he was destined for more than waiting tables in Chinatown. Enrolling at the University of Washington, he began majoring in philosophy. Now gracefully blending his studies with martial arts, Bruce was developing a campus reputation for being something of a master. Soon, friends and classmates began flocking to him for instruction.
When we first started out, he didn't charge anybody, and he never probably would have, but Bruce used to get frustrated, and so we finally said, "Look, Bruce, why don't you start a school and charge us money, and then you can go out on your own."
In 1963, while still in college, Bruce opened the Jun Fan Kung Fu Institute. But before long, the instructor's attentions began focusing on one special student, a former cheerleader named Linda Emery.
One day we were on the campus of the University of Washington, and he said, "Okay, Linda, now I want you to throw me," and he showed me how to do it. So I threw him over on the grass, and he landed on the grass, and we were kind of laughing, and he said, "Let's go to the Space Needle for dinner." I said, "You mean all of us?" And he said, "No, just you." And I was like, that was our first date, October 25th, 1963.
The relationship quickly became serious, but Linda's mother was not happy with her daughter's choice of a boyfriend. Interracial couples were not widely accepted in the 1960s, and Mrs. Emery doubted that the young philosophy student could provide a stable life for her daughter. Determined to prove her wrong, Bruce worked harder than ever to build his budding franchise of martial arts schools. And on August 17, 1964, Bruce and his former student Linda were married.
That was one time in my life I knew that I was doing the absolutely right thing, that this man was a man of quality and integrity and great love and warmth, and that we were going to be okay.
The couple moved to Oakland, California, where Bruce had already opened a second Kung Fu school. There, Bruce continued his practice of teaching any and all willing to learn.
He didn't have any barriers of color or anything like that. He said, "If your heart is right," he said, "I'm going to teach you."
He was one of the first to teach the true secrets of the martial arts to Americans and to non-Orientals. And there was a very strong feeling among many Asians that this was a corrupt practice. This was an improper thing to do.
Within months of opening his new school, Lee was confronted by a hostile group of Asian martial arts masters.
And they issued an ultimatum to Bruce Lee saying, "Stop teaching Caucasians or you're going to have to fight our top man." That, of course, was the wrong thing to say to Bruce Lee because he loved a challenge and also wasn't going to be told what to do by anybody. So I think the fight lasted 3 minutes. Bruce had subdued him, put him to the floor, and made the man say in Chinese, "I give up, I give up."
But winning the fight wasn't enough. Feeling that he should have won in seconds, not minutes, Bruce began developing a strict regimen to revolutionize martial arts.
Bruce Lee took a hard and objective look at the art of combat, and he came away with some very profound truths, such as it is constantly changing. You cannot expect to fight in a one-dimensional aspect when fighting is multidimensional.
Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Lee also hoped that martial arts would combat racism by bridging the gap between Eastern and Western cultures. And when he was invited to perform at Ed Parker's Karate Championship in Long Beach, California, He astonished the crowd with his famous one-inch punch.
He would tighten his fist and just deliver that one-inch shot of impact. But during that short distance in time, he would generate all of his body weight into the point of impact.
And he said, "Let me show you something." And he turned to Tom, to my teacher, who was then one of Parker's black belts. And he gave him his little kicking bag. He kicked Tom the length of a swimming pool and into a flower bed. I was impressed, to say the least.
But despite his growing reputation in the martial arts field, Bruce Lee was frustrated. Still struggling to make ends meet, his schools were not bringing in enough money, and the future at best seemed uncertain. What he didn't know was that fame was just around the corner. On February 1st, 1965, Bruce and Linda celebrated the birth of their first child, Brandon Bruce Lee.
Bruce's greatest joy in his whole life was his children. He wanted to have a boy because it's a very Chinese thing to have a boy to carry on.
He had a very, very, keen sense of love for his son, and he used to always brag and say he's the only blonde-haired, blue-eyed child in the world.
But just 1 week after Brandon's birth, tragedy struck when Bruce received word that his father, Lee Hoi Chuen, had died in Hong Kong. After flying home to attend the funeral, Lee returned to America more determined than ever to make his family proud of him. He focused all of his attentions on perfecting a distinctive style of martial arts, eventually called Jeet Kune Do, or the way of the intercepting fist.
He told us Jeet Kune Do is a bunch of concepts and philosophies and strategies, and you take out and make it fit into you. It's like a coat. Everyone cannot fit into a size 42 coat. It has to be tailor-made for you.
He believed that he could take the best of many different kinds of fighting, a piece here and a piece there, from boxing, wrestling, martial arts, all sorts of different physical activity, and incorporate it into a single philosophy.
Ultimately, martial art means honestly expressing yourself. I mean, it is easy for me to put on a show and be cocky, so I can show you some really fancy movement. But to express oneself honestly, not lying to oneself, and to express myself honestly, that, my friend, is very hard to do.
While Bruce was busy pouring all of his energy into martial arts, veteran TV producer William Dozier was searching for an Asian actor, one that could star in a new TV series he was developing based on the classic Charlie Chan mysteries. A friend of Dozier's, Hollywood hairstylist Jay Sebring, had recently seen Lee perform at the Ed Parker tournament and enthusiastically recommended him to the producer.
He said, "Well, listen, I've got a guy for you. It's a fellow by the name of Bruce Lee. He's a good-looking man. He's got tremendous charisma. I'll call and see if there's some footage to show you." So he did, and as soon as Dozier saw it, he knew he had his man.
Test X1. Take one, Steve. Now, Bruce, just look right into the camera lens right here and tell us your name, your age, and where you were born.
My last name is Lee, Bruce Lee. I was born in San Francisco in 1940. I'm 24 right now.
And you worked in motion pictures in Hong Kong?
Yes, since I was around 6 years old.
And when did you leave Hong Kong?
1959, when I was 18.
I see. Now look over to me, Bruce, as we talk. I understand you just had a baby boy?
Yeah.
And you lost him to sleep over it, have you?
3 nights.
In 1965, Dozier ordered this screen test for Bruce at 20th Century Fox Studios.
There is the finger jab, there is the punch, there is the back fist, and then low. Of course, then they use leg. Straight at the groin, or come up. Or, if I can back up a little bit, they stop at something, and then come back.
All right.
It kind of works.
Unfortunately for Bruce, Dozier was now busy preparing his upcoming Batman series. Charlie Chan's #1 son was scrapped, although Dozier promised Bruce that he would keep him in mind for his next project, one based on a classic radio drama from the 1930s, The Green Hornet.
They wanted to offer Bruce the part of Kato, but that wasn't going to happen until the following year because they wanted to make sure that Batman worked. So there we were, now having moved to Los Angeles, and Bruce didn't have a job.
Bruce Lee didn't have to wait very long.
To the Batcave.
Batman became a national phenomenon, and within weeks, Dozier began prepping the Green Hornet.
No need for panic, Mr. Smith. After all, we're both on the same side of the law.
Just a color thing on your racket. That's all we are after.
Racket?
It's getting late, boss.
If we're going to be partners, Mr. Smith, we mustn't keep secrets from one another.
Everything on the table where we can all see it.
Impressed with Bruce's screen presence, if not his acting, ABC network executives accepted Dozier's choice of Lee as Kato, the crime-fighting chauffeur.
And now, to protect the rights and lives of decent citizens, rides the Green Hornet.
When the show premiered on Friday, September 9th, 1966, Bruce Lee leapt onto the screen and into stardom.
He went from being a martial arts instructor to someone that everybody watched in prime time in North America. No one had ever seen anything like that. Soon the fan mail Bruce was receiving was outpulling that of the star.
Starring in the role of millionaire newspaper publisher Britt Reed, alias the Green Hornet, was a dashing all-American heartthrob named Van Williams.
No more tricks, Carly. I'm here to talk business.
The thing that impressed me about him then, as always, was his intensity. You know, he was very, very intense.
You know, if we ever meet up with that masked Kung Fu man again, I want him.
But a very nice gentleman.
Take it easy, miss. We won't hurt you.
From that moment on, Bruce and I kind of started working on friendship all through the series.
After years of financial insecurity, Bruce was now a regular in a network TV series. And although his role was secondary to that of Van Williams, he was determined not to play Kato as a subordinate.
He didn't want any chop-socky or pigtail or bowing and scraping and that kind of thing, the way that Chinese had been portrayed. So that was his rule, that he would not do any roles demeaning to the Chinese culture.
A perfectionist, Bruce worked hard to make his fight scenes as authentic as possible.
Kung Fu is Kung Fu. It's not child's play.
He soon learned the compromises required when filming for television.
We had to slow up his action because we found in the test that he was moving too fast for the speed of the motion picture film. People may not realize he could have been faster than he was.
Never as campy or colorful as their Cape counterparts.
Holy uncanny photographic mental processes.
The Green Hornet and Kato failed to catch on with primetime audiences. In a desperate effort to save the show, Dozier and ABC concocted a face-off between Batman and Robin and the Green Hornet and Kato.
No Batmobile. Good. We can get some work done first. Fast.
And the original script was that he gets into a fight with Robin and loses.
Holy split seconds, let's go.
Well, he just went right through the roof. And he said, there is no way I'm going to get into a fight with Robin and lose. Bert had told everybody, you know, he's a big black belt and big tough guy. And Bruce had heard all about this. So he was going to play his Chinese water torture game on him. He let out little words. He was going to get this guy. And Bruce comes in and he gives him the silent treatment, you know. And he's grumbling around and said, you know, Bert thought he was just going to lose his temper and just destroy him. Adam said that Bert Ward was just shaking in his shorts. He was so scared that Bruce was going to take after him.
Ultimately, the producers ended the battle in a draw to avoid upsetting fans of either show.
None too smart for a smart crime fighter? Are we just letting them go, Batman?
But it didn't matter. The Green Hornet was canceled after just one season.
That was unquestionably a big blow to Bruce Lee. He had hoped that the show would be more successful. He had hoped to use that as a springboard, and it didn't work out.
With the cancellation of the Green Hornet, the future was once again uncertain. And despite a new legion of loyal fans and the powerful contacts he had made in the entertainment industry, Bruce Lee would again be facing tough times.